Have a world champion who hasn't won a Grand Prix.
Keke Rosberg of Helsinki, Finland, Grand Prix winner, world driving champion.
Now they're saying we have a world champion who only won one Grand Prix.
1978, 9 races, 1 non-qualification, 3 different cars, no championship points. 1979, 8 races, failed to qualify once, did not finish once, no points. 1980, 11 races, failed to qualify 3 times, retired twice, 6 points. 1981, 15 races, failed to qualify in 5 events, failed to finish 5 times, no points. 1982, world driving champion. Keke Rosberg came off the tundra of motor racing frustration to the hard pavement of the ultimate success the automobile can offer. A year earlier, Rosberg was just another motorist. In 1982, he was the driver all others were judged by. To even compete for the World Championship is an honor accorded to only the exalted upper echelon of superb drivers. To win it is to join the immortals, Juan Fangio, Alberto Ascari, Jimmy Clark, Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda. One of those immortals, Niki Lauda, was to be among Rosberg's sternest competitors for the championship. Another test would be Alain Prost, the driving sensation of the previous season, again leading the French Renault charge for the top motor racing honors. Ireland's John Watson, Lauda's partner in the Marlboro team, was among the most experienced drivers ever to race and a factor in the title chase until the final flag of the season. Since the birth of Grand Prix, no one could ever ignore the Ferrari team, and no one ever expressed its fire and flair better than Canada's Gilles Villeneuve. Past performance and future prospects were variables of equal weight until put to the simplest of tests, driving from starting line to finish line as quickly as possible. 26 championship candidates had that firmly in mind at the start of the season in Kyalami, South Africa. None more firmly than René Arnoux and Alain Prost. The brilliant French drivers in their blazing yellow cars took advantage of their turbo power to charge away from the crowd. South Africa was the opening act of the season-long play of the smaller, more powerful turbocharged engines of teams such as Renault and Ferrari against the normally aspirated, tried and trusted Cosworth power of teams like Marlboro and Williams. It was a turbo triumph in the rarefied atmosphere of Kyalami, Alain Prost taking the checkered flag in spite of having to stop for a new set of tires. Prost and Renault described it as their most satisfying win. Prost added a victory in Brazil and led both the championship table and the starting grid at the Belgian Grand Prix at Zolder. Teammate René Arnoux got the better of the start, and even Rosberg was able to slot in ahead of Prost when the light turned green. John Watson did not figure in the early running, having qualified far down in 11th. As so often in the past, Arnoux and Renault were the fastest pair in motor racing, for a few laps. The leading Renault lasted only 4 laps before disappearing into the pits, and Keke Rosberg was suddenly setting the pace, totally dominating Zolder for over 60 laps. Frank Williams had another winner on his team. It was the first outing for the FW08 Williams and gave the Flying Finn the command of a race his supporters had long predicted. Even twice world champion Niki Lauda could make no impression on Rosberg's lead. Watson, having worked his way up relentlessly from 11th, cut by Rosberg and into the lead with only 2 laps to go. The Irish driver took his 3rd checkered flag and his first serious run at the World Championship in his 10th year of Grand Prix racing. Second place went to Rosberg, but no one doubted his turn at the top of the victory stand would soon come. The World Driving Championship is one of the few unalloyed, undisputed titles left in sports. It is not broken into divisions nor claimed by rival organizations. Thousands have competed for it. Only 20 have ever won it. The championship is determined solely in Formula One Grand Prix, the highest and most demanding form of motor racing. The Grand Prix season, 16 races in 1982, begins in the southern summer of Africa and South America, moving with the sun to North America and Europe. The title campaign is waged over and around an infinite variety of challenges on 4 continents, from the high mountains of South Africa to the seaside sand dunes of Holland. From alpine pastures in Austria to the glamour-drenched streets of Monte Carlo. While each of the 16 races is an individual Armageddon, it is the points amassed over the entire season that determines the world champion. Championship points are awarded only to the top 6 finishers in each race, with the winner gaining 9, second place awarded 6, and third 4. The next 3 places earn 3, 2, and 1. The equally prestigious Constructors' Championship is determined on the same point system, with points earned by the normal team's 2 drivers combined. The Constructors' title was taken for an unprecedented 10th year in 1982 by the legendary Ferrari, chased to the final flag by Marlboro McLaren, Renault, and Williams. The Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, Holland, opened the second half of the 16-race season with Watson clearly leading the championship stakes and Renault owning the entire front row. At the halfway point, the season had been formless. Prost and Watson each winning twice, Lauda once, and Rosberg finishing in the points with admirable consistency. It was time for a driver to take charge, and Holland made it look like a turbocharge. Didier Pironi surged away from the pack with the authoritative ease that had evaded Ferrari in recent seasons. Only the Renault of Prost and Arnoux could keep pace with the effortless speed of the Italian machine. Watson was soldiering his way up in the standings when the wheels came out from under his title chase. The Marlboro pit crew had him soon on new tires, but it was too late for the points. Pironi had no problems at all, cruising easily to the finish line without a hint of challenge. Didier Pironi was another of the legion of French drivers to suddenly dominate foreign circuits. His second win of the year put him potently in the title picture, as Ferrari finally had a chassis as powerful as its engine. The French driver was second in the championship standings, and his Italian car held an equal place in the Constructors' contest. Leading the Constructors' Championship was Marlboro, Niki Lauda taking 4th place in the Dutch race after a well-judged race against faster equipment. Sharing the victory stand for the 5th time in the season was Keke Rosberg, the best non-turbo driver of the day. Niki Lauda had won 18 Grand Prix in his illustrious career, far more than any other active driver. He was favored to add to that total in the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch. Teammate John Watson, like Lauda, also numbered the British Grand Prix among his victories. There was equal optimism in the Ferrari camp, as the Scuderia had captured the event 9 times in the past. Patrick Tambay had joined the team and had immediately become a strong partner to Pironi in the quest for driving in Constructors' Championships. As with Keke Rosberg, Tambay had paid his dues with uncompetitive cars and now showed his true skill with the proper equipment. Pironi had taken over team leadership on the death of Gilles Villeneuve in Belgium. There was much less optimism in the Renault pits. Their 2 cars shut out of the front row on the grid for the first time in 7 races. The French flagships were proving to be enormously fast and immensely unreliable, setting the pace but absent at the end. happiest pre-race team of all was Williams, with leader Keke Rosberg fastest in practice and trials and sitting on the first pole of his career.
The bottom has to be Brent Schatz, who had been quickest through testing, practice, everything. Had the only pole position that Cosworth had in 82, only to find out the car didn't start when the warm-up lap started.
The usually impeccable Williams expired at the worst possible time and had to be pushed away from the grid while the rest of the field warmed up their engines and scrubbed the shine off their tires. Rosberg went from guiding the quickest to the slowest car in England in the sputter of an engine. The Finn proved more fortunate in the actual start, getting away ahead of a collision that eliminated 3 cars before they crossed the line and forcing Watson to drive cross-country. As the survivors sorted themselves out through the first corners, the day was already arranging itself for Niki Lauda. When the great Austrian puts all the elements together, there is no one who ever drove with more precision and pace. Lauda won 2 world championships in the mid-1970s, then retired from the sport. He came back after 2 years in 1982, scored points in his first race, and won his third, showing no effects of his idleness. Rosberg's day of frustration ended on the 51st lap, the fuel pressure problem that had stalled him earlier, consigning him to the pits. Lauda cruised half a minute ahead of any competition, taking the 19th checkered flag of his career. Only Stewart, Clark, and Fangio ever recorded more. The 9 points for victory also put Lauda very much in the title sweepstakes. Didier Pironi and Patrick Tambay followed Lauda across in a pair of Ferraris for a share of the champagne. There is no place like home for Renault, born and bred on the Paul Ricard circuit in the south of France. The twin cars of Arnoux and Prost swept the time trials, qualifying more than a full second ahead of anyone else. The French Grand Prix has been a festival Renault in recent years, and the crowds flocked to the sunny track in anticipation of a national victory. Pre-race efforts focused on closing the gap with the dominant French cars. For the Cosworth-powered cars, such as Rosberg's Williams, Ricard was an alien circuit. The first 6 places on the starting grid had been claimed by turbocharged machinery. The Williams team had to compensate for its lack of turbocharged top-line speed by enhancing their car's superior agility and reliability. The often quoted Murphy's Law is that if anything can go wrong, it will. To racing crews, Murphy was an optimist. Renault was without a victory since Brazil at the beginning of the season and intended to redress that situation in their own backyard. The race started according to the script, Arnoux and Prost rocketing away at speeds that reached over 300 kilometers an hour. Arnoux had never won before the home crowd before, a stimulus that sent him flying around the fast circuit. For the rest of the field, the only way they could catch the Renault twins would be if the French cars again suffered the mechanical woes that had dogged them all season. But it was not the yellow cars who suffered the problems. The torrid pace and tropical heat was taking a heavy toll on tires. Watson was a victim of ball tires as well as a broken battery connection, which finished his race. Lauda also needed mechanical attention, dropping him out of a secure 6th place. Arnoux was untroubled, leading teammate Prost for the last 30 laps of the race. Didier Pironi, ahead of Ferrari teammate Patrick Tambay, led the non-Renault race. Keke Rosberg, in a typical charging, scrambling effort, lay fifth, or first in the non-turbo class, had there been one. Arnoux headed the first 1-2 Renault finish in the team's 5-year history. He couldn't have picked a more appropriate or popular place to do it. The crowds didn't wait for the victory stand to show their approval. The Swiss, who have long exported watches, cheese, and chocolate, exported their Grand Prix over the French border to nearby Dijon-Prenois. Regardless of the nationality of the race or the track, there was work to be done to master it. Only 3 rounds remained in the championship, and Lauda, Watson, Prost, and Rosberg were locked in contention for the driving title. Prost was pleased with staging of the event at Dijon, as he had captured both the French and Swiss Grand Prix on the same circuit a year earlier. It was also at Dijon the Renault scored its first racing victory, the French Grand Prix in 1979. The Marlboro team looked upon Dijon as an opportunity to close in on Ferrari in the constructors' race. With both Peroni and Tambi sidelined with injuries, the Italian team could not defend its lead until its home Grand Prix 2 weeks later. Alain Prost surprised no one in capturing the pole on the starting grid. He already held the existing lap record at Dijon, set in the same race in 1981. For the 5th time in the season, he would be joined on the front row of the grid by Arnoux, making it an exclusive Renault club. The season was closing quickly on Keke Rosberg. So close to victory on several occasions, but still looking for the first win to go with his championship. No one had ever been world champion without a victory during the title year. Rosberg desired to join the illustrious company of Sir Jack Brabham, Denny Hulme, and Graham Hill, all of whom took their first win and their first championship in the same season. There would be 7 cars in front of Rosberg at the start, a lot of traffic to work through if he was to be first at the finish. Rosberg's enthusiasm was shared by a large company of his fellow countrymen. Arnoux snatched the lead from Prost on the first circuit of the course. Then Prost took it right back on the second by breaking his own lap record by nearly 2 seconds. Once again, a race had become a Renault processional, and once again, it became a matter of whether they would hold together for the whole afternoon. For Arnoux, the answer was no. An excellent race came to nothing when he had to pit for attention to a faulty turbocharger. Arnoux raced back out, far down from the comfortable third he had held. Niki Lauda was having a good day, working steadily up to third. Keke Rosberg was having a great day. Prost had been motoring alone for 78 of the 80 laps, appearing certain to take 3 out of 3 at Dijon over 2 seasons. Then his mirrors were suddenly full of the green and white colors of Rosberg's storming Williams. On lap 79, Rosberg's drive of sheer brilliance put him through. Nothing at all between the fin and the flag. By a fraction of the same second he had known ruefully in the past, Rosberg nipped Prost and the Swiss Grand Prix. That called for champagne. The countdown for a space mission is the only technical exercise as exquisite as the preparation for a Formula One Grand Prix race. It goes farther than the simile, with space engineering and innovation employed to let the driver read a video printout of his speeds through different segments of the track and those of his competitors. Again, like a space shot, pre-race activity is the search for fractions of improvement, segments of development, intolerance of imperfection. Unlike an astronaut, a race driver can bring unsuitable equipment back for adjustment. If the tires are wrong, the suspension unsatisfactory, the engine ailing, the car goes back and the mechanics try something new. Practice sessions 2 and 3 days before the race allow the teams to groove the car for the unique demands of every circuit, the individual style of every driver, the assets and debits of every car. Race car crews, like their aeronautical counterparts, are not working at the frontiers of technology. They are creating it as they go.
There's a problem with the engine. If it's drivable, soldier on, because I'd like to actually know what this car feels like.
Put the 706s in the right, see what happens to the temperatures all the way around. I know, I don't think they're going to work.
We don't really know about the engine. It didn't sound good to me when it's warmed up, so don't give it a go. If it's not too bad. Tape it.
Preparation at the penultimate race of the season, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, was especially painstaking. Both individual and team championships were still very much unsettled. Peroni was out of the driving championship after a practice accident in Germany, but Rosberg, Prost, Lauda, and Watson were definitely in. Constructor laurels were available for Ferrari, McLaren, Renault, or Williams. With 15 of the 16 practice sessions behind them, the drivers again headed out to determine who would reign over the long season. All Italy seemed to wait for the green light. For the car nearest it was the Ferrari of Mario Andretti, returning to the mark that inspired him into motor racing to begin with. The hundreds of thousands muted their passion when the lead car arrived at the end of the first lap, liveried in Renault yellow rather than Ferrari red. Watson continued his championship charge with the best run by a non-turbo car. He and the MP4 performing splendidly. Rosberg was romping as well, working swiftly toward the one point that would put him beyond the reach of any of the other championship candidates and make the final race a mere formality. Lauda's hopes for a third world title shredded with his brakes, and he had to watch the rest of the race from the pits. Attention was riveted on the Renault and the two Ferraris, running their own separate race. Rosberg failed to clinch the title when his wing took off on its own and he scorched into the pits for a replacement. He was quickly back in the race, but out of the points. Arnoux soloed ahead of the favored Ferraris, and the massive audience consoled itself with the fact that he had already signed to drive for the Italian team the following season. It was bizarrely appropriate that the 1982 Grand Prix season would end in a parking lot in the Nevada desert. The World Championship, like most decisions in Las Vegas, would be determined by a final throw of the dice. Team manager Frank Williams had seen the cars bearing his name win the finest honors in racing, but never lost sight of the truth that the game ended only when the last card was played and the last lap was run. Rosberg qualified 6th on the grid and needed only to finish that high to be untouchable. 1/3 of the way home, he worked up to 5th and sat comfortably there. The Williams team kept the vigil they knew well, awaiting confirmation of their World Driving Championship in 1980 and the Constructors' title in 80 and 81. Rosberg drove serenely into 5th place, and the Williams crew erupted with the joy of their 4th championship in 3 years. Keke Rosberg was the finest type of champion, one who had reversed all the odds, one who had turned the negative into the positive. A year earlier, he had nothing to show for the season other than disappointment and doubts. Now he viewed the world from the ethereal heights tasted only by 19 other men. In the worst of times, Rosberg continued to drive with style and grace and sheer enthusiasm for the sport. Now, in the best of times, he had every intention of driving with style and grace and sheer enthusiasm for the sport.
Tässä hänen tyyli näyttää.